So I'm going to do the awkward thing of introducing you when you're already sitting next to me, but you'll have to bear with me here. So Barry Beck is the Cornell 2023 Entrepreneur of the Year. So that's awesome. And in 2020, you received the 2020 Cornell University Alpern Distinguished Alumni Award. So most currently, Barry is the founder and CEO of Evenly Technologies, a fast-growing AI-enabled telemedicine platform, and we'll learn more about that in just a minute. And then prior to Evenly, he was also the founder and former chief operating officer of Bluemercury, the national luxury beauty brand that was acquired by Macy's in 2015. So welcome, Barry, and thanks again for being with us today. So Barry, maybe you could start by just giving us a little bit of background. So where were you born? Where did you grow up?
All right. I was born in Alexandria, Virginia, but I really grew up in Philadelphia. My father was in GW Law School when I was born, and my parents moved back to Philadelphia. My father became an intellectual property attorney, and my mother was a school teacher. We grew up in a pretty modest household. My father's father died when my dad was 10 years old, and his family told him he had to go home and take care of his family. He was a brilliant student. He was accepted at MIT, but he had to go to the local engineering school, a school named Drexel University, so he could bag groceries and pay for his family. And this is where he met my mom, who grew up in a dramatically different circumstance. My mother grew up in one of the wealthiest families in Philadelphia, her father being the maker of Lacoste, the little alligator brand that you may have heard of, which was wildly popular when I was a kid, the eponymous brand name for Rene Lacoste, the wild tennis player known as the Crocodile. And my parents got married after college. And my grandfather said to my dad, I'd like you to join the family business. And my father said, maybe, unfortunately for me, I'd rather be poor than ever work for my father-in-law. So, my mother's sister and their family jumped into the business. So I was always tangential to that sort of entrepreneurship. And, I never really understood it because I was such a young boy. So it was never really about money, really necessarily. But it was maybe sort of looking back now, this perceived independence that probably drove me to be an entrepreneur my whole life.
So let's talk about the entrepreneurship journey that emerged. So there have been a few companies over the years. Maybe you could give us a little bit of background about how each one came about.
I think I've always been an entrepreneur since I've been a young boy, starting small businesses since I was 11 years old. Shoveling snow, auto detailing, small construction projects. I think sort of winding my way into bigger opportunities, picking up steam sort of later in high school and then, of course, in college. As a junior at Cornell University, I really founded my first sort of national business, a company called Tower Systems, which I started when I was in my dorm room with a brother and a friend. Which later went on to become U.S. Maintenance. It's now a publicly traded company. It's a Fortune 500 company. Started in my dorm room. And we basically revolutionized multi-site management of properties and grew to count Starbucks and Bank of America as some of our customers. And then my next sort of big national company, which I think I'm probably best known for, was a company called Bluemercury, which today is the largest luxury beauty products and retail spa chain in America. And when I came into the beauty industry in the early 2000s, 90% of luxury beauty was sold at department stores and malls. And we had a hypothesis that, and we bet correctly, that these malls and stores would no longer be convenient. And so 90% was sold there as we finished, and this was a $100 billion opportunity. And so by the time we were finished building out our business, that 90% went to 60%, and that extra 30% went to small format stores like Bluemercury, and ultimately that company was also acquired by a Fortune 100 company, and I think that company's probably, I don't work there, so I don't know exactly how much it's worth, but probably $2 to $3 billion today, and it's still part of a public company. And then my latest company is a company called Evenly Technologies. We're an AI-enabled telemedicine company that helps general dentists do orthodontics, which is teeth straightening, like Invisalign, in their practice. And our platform helps dentists keep this service in their office versus referring it out to a specialist. And for this reason, they're able to keep the revenue in their practice, keep the patients in their practice with comprehensive care. They've been highly incentivized because of this to adopt my platform, and I think this is one of the reasons why we're transforming the industry, and we've been tripling our size every single year since we founded the company. So very excited about my next opportunity.
So the number of different journeys, and I'm sure each one of them sounds different, but I'm sure there's some muscle memory in each one that you carry for forward. When someone wants to be a successful entrepreneur, or when someone wants to do their next venture as a successful entrepreneur, capable of raising capital, disrupting an industry, like what is, as you reflect, what are those key muscles? What are the things that make you a successful entrepreneur?
I would say typically entrepreneurs are people who have done it before. Right, these are people that are, able to attract incredible talent, lower the cost of capital, and sort of tell stories and sell their vision. But I think there's a risk to putting this all under one rubric, because alternatively, there's this sort of set of first-time entrepreneurs who are able to believe in a different future long before most people can understand it. Schopenhauer famously said, talent is hitting a target no one else can hit, but genius is hitting a target no one else can see. By way of example, this morning, I went down and had a perfect stranger pick me up and take me to a place I've never been before. And that was sort of everything my mother warned me not to do. But that company, I checked the ticker symbol this morning, it's an $89 billion company called Uber. And so I think that there's this sort of certitude amongst large companies that everything's going to continue on the same way. And I think sort of any presumption for these large companies that linearity of linearity is really a dangerous thing. I think too much is probably placed. Too much is placed on sort of thinking about the analytical edge for entrepreneurs and not enough on their behavioral edge. And so for me, it's much more about someone's orientation towards disruption rather than how smart they are, especially today with AI and the information superhighway right at your fingertips. It really levels the playing field. And I also think that sort of people always ask me, what are the specific attributes of a great entrepreneur? And so I'm not sure there's an exact recipe for that, but sometimes it's sort of their maladaptive qualities, people that are stubborn, overly obsessed on the detail, or people with grandiose visions that actually make them unsuitable for corporate America, but make them perfect for starting a company. The last thing I would say about that is, I feel like people think that entrepreneurs are these mythological figures, but they're not. They're actually just like you and me. And most, people say, oh, they're cowboys and they're mavericks. We're not. We're actually often exceedingly good risk managers and risk killers. And so that's my thought about what it takes to become a good entrepreneur.
I love it. And I think that there's the idea of bold risk taking, yet hedging risk and managing risk. I mean, there's some contradictions that actually probably do define the entrepreneur, is like managing those contradictions and being able to waver, between when to move forward, but when to also hedge and make sure, you're safe. I think that's a fascinating description and set of characteristics. So let's talk about ideas. A lot of folks in this room, have ideas that they want to make happen. And I'm sure you've had many more ideas than you've had businesses. How do you determine, from your perspective, when you should develop an idea further and which ideas, end up really being successful versus the rest?
Yeah, so when it comes to entrepreneurial ideas, I think the most important thing I would say to everyone in this room is this is not something you can just go down to the office of Bright Ideas and pick something up. It doesn't work like that. The best ideas creating the next miracle company come from solving a problem. No problem, no solution, no company. And the bigger the problem, the bigger the opportunity you have to create revolutionary change. And I think, again, so many big companies are just easy targets because it's hard for them to sort of think outside of their current business. I've jumped into 3 completely different industries, ones that I knew nothing about because I came in as an insider. As an outsider to these inside companies and saw the things that they didn't see because most companies are really busy managing quarter to quarter, managing their numbers. You know, Mark Twain said, it's not what you don't know that'll get you in trouble, it's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And so if you ask Jeff Bezos, he predicted that Amazon will eventually go bankrupt. And that, for me, is very easy to see because I believe that managing to best practices and fine-tuning any business ultimately will lead to dead ends. And so when you can look at any industry, any company, they're always vulnerable. The only other thing I would say when you're looking for an idea, there's this, obviously because of that, there's this large corpus of things that can inspire you. But one thing I would recommend is to think about the idea that every great entrepreneur rode some great wave. Even Rockefeller, he rode the wave of industrialization. Look at Bill Gates, he rode the software revolution. Steve Jobs, the hardware revolution. You know, we don't know exactly which entrepreneur or which company, but for sure we know there are directional arrows of progress. Right now, you've got AI. If you're starting a company and you can, in a meaningful and thoughtful way, incorporate artificial intelligence into your business, it's much more likely that you're going to be able to raise money and build an amazing company.
And let's talk about capital for a minute then. So venture capital, I've always said, I have mixed feelings. I've seen it work and I've also seen it not work. I've seen some businesses that probably shouldn't have been funded and many that, should have maybe raised more. And, can you give us a sense of how you've approached venture capital in your businesses and how someone should think about whether or not to take money and, and how to go about that?
Well, wait a minute. Isn't entrepreneurship man's highest calling? So shouldn't we, mankind, excuse me, so shouldn't we just have venture capitalists out there just handing out money left and right? Well, maybe not. I think it makes sense for a second to just probably pull the lens back and look at the venture capital and private equity landscape. So think about it. Western economic development for the past 200 years, and more recently Eastern economic development, and through the first and second industrial revolution, and then of course the computer revolution, has caused trillions of dollars to be pulled up in sovereign wealth funds, endowments, these venture capital and private equity funds. In fact, the problem is there's so much money out there, there's more money out there than there are actually investable opportunities. And so there is this sort of broad mismatch, and I think it's widening. In fact, most entrepreneurial companies never get to 10 million in sales, and actually there are many venture capital funds that have a poor track record of picking the right companies. I think that, of course, you're thinking, well, great, there's a broad mismatch, and you're right, because it's much easier for entrepreneurs to raise money if you've got a great idea. But again, because these companies keep investing, hoping that the next idea will be better than the last business that they invested in. I do like to call this the triumph of hope over experience, otherwise known, of course, as the sixth marriage effect, thinking that this next time will be better than the last 5 times. But, the bottom line with venture capital is every firm is looking for the next entrepreneur, the next Elon Musk. Of course, there's thousands of levels of below Elon Musk. This has been dubbed as the puzzle of the missing Elons. We need these entrepreneurs to create a world that's better than the one that we have today, one that's more peaceful and prosperous. And so I think it's a great opportunity for you guys if you can sell your vision, tell stories with a great idea.
Well, then that's a very empowering message, and it sounds like there's not a shortage of capital in the world to fund great entrepreneurial companies, but it seems like there is a shortage of these great entrepreneurial companies or these next generation of Elons. The fact that there's so few people we count on our hands that are in that caliber, it's sort of frustrating. So, why is this? Why do you think we have a shortage of these entrepreneurial companies if it's not capital?
I think it's a great question. Where are these people? Where is the next Elon Musk? Were they born that way? How do we find them? I think the big takeaway today is this is probably the $1 trillion question. Think about it, right? So if you landed on Earth today from another galaxy and you saw a world where we have all these problems, but we also have all this money. And so you have all these problems that need to be solved, and you have all this money that needs a great return, right? These venture capital firms need to invest their money. They need to get a minimum of a 7% hurdle rate to pay for the retirement of all of modern society. So why can't we just get all that money to the right people, solve the problems, build amazing companies, and it just seems like it's something trivially easy to solve, right? But by the way, I think a lot about this stuff, which is that, yeah, I'm weird. I think about these things. I think the problem is a little bit more complex because I tend to think about societal reaction to disruption and change, right? So do we want the disruption that change creates? Are we willing to have this sort of hierarchy of who has power in different industries to be arbitrarily overturned? Think about it. When Bluemercury launched into the cosmetics industry in the early 2000s, the industry folks really told us they didn't like what we were doing. They didn't believe what we were doing. I mean, think about starting a car company in the early 2000s. How much government red tape there was. And imagine all the car companies didn't want another competitor. I think these are all just sort of micro examples of what can cause a long-run sag and dynamism in America today. I think if I could use my Entrepreneur of the Year award in some small way, it would be to try to inspire everyone here today to be an entrepreneur, because we need your help solving problems and creating a world that is better, more prosperous, and more peaceful than the one that we have inherited. We need more entrepreneurs.
And it's interesting that the more structured and efficient society is, in some ways, the stronger the immune system of society that extinguishes the people that stand out and take the risk to be entrepreneurs. And then here we're saying we need more people to shun that status quo and change society as we know it. I love that analogy of someone landing on the earth for the first time and admiring everything, also recognizing all these problems to be solved. So what advice would you give the aspiring entrepreneur that is seeking to break through that immune system and create something new, change an industry, build a brand that changes everything?
I would say one thing about your last comment, which is, when we live in a society when power is controlled in an industry or by a government by a small group of people, and then society is rigid, I think this is a real impediment to creativity and creative expression. And so that is a problem.
I agree.
So what was the next question?
Yeah, so it just those are the confines, though, that and so when we're talking about the need for more entrepreneurs, and these are folks who are able to sort of break through, like you have, and a few times before. What advice do you have for the aspiring entrepreneurs in the room?
I just want to say I talk to my mentors about every week, so I'm in constant need of advice for myself. If I would just give sort of 3 pieces of advice, I would say sort of 1, get in the game. 2, don't be afraid to break some rules. And 3, when you get in the game, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So getting in the game, I would just say, of course, good businesses are as difficult to find as they are rare. And it's sort of hard to connect the dots in advance. But entrepreneurs, all entrepreneurs, have to be by their nature optimists. They have to believe that if you get in the game, good things will happen. You start, you might fail, but you'll pivot into the next idea. My life and career has been something that's really been lived forward, but mostly really understood backwards. And so you got to get in the game for good things to happen. And the second thing is you can't be afraid to break some rules. When I think about the world today, there's a tendency to catastrophize every new idea and every new technology. I've decided now that every time my mom says this new technology is going to rot your brain, I immediately invest because I know it's going to be the next $10 billion industry. That's what they said about television, rock and roll, and social media. So, and then the next thing I just would say is it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? Some companies shoot out of a cannon and they're just successful right away. But the truth is, most businesses take a little bit longer. Think about it. You can't produce a baby in 30 days by getting 9 women pregnant. And the reason is because some things just take time. So even Google used to throw a party every time one of their new ideas failed. Why? Because it gave them an opportunity to see what didn't work, pivot into the next big idea, and build an amazing part of their company. And I just really believe this is an evolved level of wisdom.
So I want to now talk a little bit about AI. I know that's an area that you're focusing on right now. And you mentioned that it's going to probably have a role in many of our businesses in the room. How do you think AI will change the world of entrepreneurship?
Well, I have a particular thought about it. We're using AI heavily in our business today. It's how we're treating so many of our patients. There's just so much to talk about. I'll try to keep it brief. But, I would say, number one, the startup rush has begun, in case you haven't noticed. This is probably the most exciting time to be an entrepreneur since I've been alive. I think that's number one. And I think for me, when I look at it, I think it's one of these sort of rare eureka moments. And I think if you talk to the leading experts, they can't believe what actually happened, which is computers and machines helping us think. It's probably the biggest discovery since we split the atom, except the difference with that is that we needed plutonium to do it. AI is a general purpose technology. It's just software. And it's really basic. Essentially, if you look at ChatGPT, it's just really a very fancy autocomplete. But I do believe that future generations of this software will be able to complete entire books as good as Stephen King with one sentence. And so, of course, naturally, people say, well, is this bad? And I do think that, could it be bad? Maybe in some ways, just the way that I said earlier, possibly that, maybe automation on the factory floor was bad, but, and there may be some kernels in truth to that, but ultimately we ended off as a better society. My father says, I've ended up worse off because I never know where I am. I'm so dependent on my nav, right? But, Socrates argued against the written word. Right? He said that we shouldn't write things down because so much will be lost between a storyteller and listener, and the human language will be flattened out. He's a pretty smart guy, right? But so much flowed out of the written word: modern government, society, mathematics. And so I do think that society will end up in a better place. I think it's an amazing time to be an entrepreneur if you can find a way to incorporate AI into your business. And I think one of the most exciting things, which is a little bit upstream in my thinking, which is the opportunity for the first time in human history for fresh signal, which is when you have all the world's knowledge encapsulated in just a small little computer chip, that for the first time we can now have ideas that we've never thought were possible before, that have never even occurred, because everything we do is something that's sort of iterated from something that has been done before. So now this idea of the possibility of fresh ideas and fresh signal is really one of the most exciting things to happen to mankind in recent history. I do believe that this will, change the way humankind reacts with knowledge forever. And I do think a little bit, without overstating it, this will sort of end human evolution as we know it. Now, you may say, wow, that is such a big idea. When is that going to happen? And I would say that they asked Hemingway, how'd your wealthy friend go bankrupt? And he said, gradually, and then suddenly. And so I think, right, so how is this going to change society as we know it? Gradually, and then suddenly.
So, Barry, I'm sure you said that you still do go to mentors and advisors. Who are the business leaders, though, as you reflect, that you felt were most important to you as you came up in the business world in terms of being mentors of you?
These are good questions. I would say that 3 people that I look to for inspiration. One, of course, I think we all look to Steve Jobs. Why? Because he changed everything. How we take taxis, how we take photos, essentially how we interact with knowledge. I mean, he changed everything. And he was also the one that said, don't live by the dogma of others, don't be afraid to think differently. And so I think he's one person. Also, Jeff Bezos, of course, because he embodies the idea, 2 sort of main ideas, which is one, solve a problem, right? He saw there was a problem with the way people were shopping and they weren't happy, and he saw an opportunity. And the second thing that Jeff Bezos, I think, taught us was that sometimes you undersize the market. He probably had no idea how big his opportunity actually was, which is such an inspiration. Look at Travis Kalanick, who founded Uber. He thought that the idea was, oh, I'm just going to change the town car market, the black car market for executives. Wow, talk about a guy who really undersized his opportunity. He changed the entire world of transportation. And I would say the third person that I went to or thought about for advice was actually an early investor in Bluemercury, a guy named Dick Darman, who was the author of the 1986 tax budget reform under Ronald Reagan. And I'll never forget it, at the end of a board meeting, I said, Dick, give me one nugget, give me something. He's a brilliant guy. And I'll never forget, he leaned across the board table and he whispered in my ear, remember, nothing's great forever. And I thought a lot about that, and I think you have to realize that markets fluctuate, stock markets drop, and even whole asset classes disappear. Imagine, who thought we'd have a global pandemic in 2020? And so if you're a successful entrepreneur and you have a fast-growing asset, don't be afraid to rebalance your risk equation. Maybe sell half your company and then grow the rest. They asked Baron Rothschild, how'd you get so rich? He said, I always sold too early. And so I think that this is a good advice. Always look to rebalance your risk equation.
So we always like to explore mistakes here. I feel like we all learn from each other, especially the things that go wrong, not only the things that go right. And we certainly try to also ask Cornell Entrepreneur Award winners to always share with us candidly a few mistakes that they've learned from. So maybe can you reflect on a couple of mistakes that you can share in terms of the consequences and also what you learned?
Mistakes? Hold on a second, let me check my watch. Do you guys have the rest of the day? I've made so many mistakes in my career, and it's so easy. Entrepreneurs, we all look like swans going across the water, so calm and serene, but underneath, I think we're all paddling like hell. And so if I could explore if I gave you 2 big mistakes I think I've made, I would say number 1 was Droom. Don't run out of money. Today, every morning I wake up and I try to figure out where I'm going to die, and I just don't go there, right? It's a pretty good idea, right? So when you run out of money, your company's dead. And so when you start your company, you need to absolutely identify how much capital you need up front, how much capital you need in reserve, and make sure you don't run out of money because of Droom. And so throughout my career, my early days, I ran out of money probably 4 times. And it is something that is probably one of the most painful experiences. It's like, how many times do you touch a hot stove? Unfortunately, I've made the mistake so many times. I would tell you normally you'd only touch it once, but I have touched it many times. And now with my latest company, we've made sure that we've raised enough money and we don't make that mistake again. And I would say the next big mistake I've made in my career is not listening to my own inner voice. And early in my career, when we started as an internet company at Bluemercury, I knew, my instinct told me that we had to switch from an internet company to a physical world business. That was my intuition. And I'll never forget, it was actually a very brilliant person. It was a Cornell engineer, Harvard MBA, who told me that there's no such thing as instinct. You can't follow your instinct. It's got to be hard, empirical analysis. I carried that with me for a really long time, by the way, and I finally talked to a professor about that, and they said, of course there's instinct. It's called pattern recognition. And so it's cost me a lot of money not following my instinct, seeing my companies going down a wrong path, but having my either business partners, the money that's backing me, trying to keep me to continue to test and learn in something I know isn't working because I'm so close to it. And so my advice is follow your intuition, follow your curiosity, and follow your instinct. And don't be afraid to be a little bit paranoid. And that will make you a better entrepreneur along the way.
And I think that's great advice. So last two questions here. First, a quick one, and then we'll end on a reflective one. But the quick one first. Any top entrepreneurial book recommendations you have for the group here?
Let's see. I think the first entrepreneurial book I read was a little teeny book when I was a young guy, graduated from Cornell, was a book called Grinding It Out. It was the story about this irrepressible enthusiast, a fellow named Ray Kroc, who built the Golden Arches, McDonald's, into the largest company of its kind. It's just an incredible story. I would say the next super inspirational book would be The Upstarts, the story of this sort of next generation of Silicon Valley renegades, the founders of Uber. Everyone's bobbing their heads up and down. You've already read this book. The founders of Uber and the founders of Airbnb, who are following in the footsteps of their forefathers. They're actually forefathers now, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. An amazing story of their entrepreneurial journeys, people that were able to believe in their idea long before we could even understand it. And then I would say the next book I would recommend, especially if you're an existing CEO, would be a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is, it looks like every CEO you see, every entrepreneur, we're just living the dream. But sometimes that dream becomes a nightmare and you wake up in cold sweats. So, it's not always that easy to run your business, and sometimes being a CEO of an entrepreneurial venture could be the loneliest job in the world. And people talk about, oh, I've got a silver bullet. The truth is, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. The bullets are only lead. But for me, I think about that, and there's no place I'd rather be than at the helm of my amazing companies, inspiring my teams and building a great business. And so I love it. I recommend it. I've always wanted to be a CEO, obviously, since I've been a little kid, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
So final question then is as you think about your life and career up till now, and I'm sure the answer to this has changed over the years, how do you define success?
Well, first of all, I would say I don't know that I'm really that successful, right? In the world today, there's a lot of levels. Right? So, for one thing that I think about is this idea that I can't do it all, but I can have it all. And building an amazing family for me, my amazing wife who's here with us today, who inspires me every day, and my 3 wonderful children, this is sort of the lens for which I measure growth. Building an amazing, fun-loving family and building amazing companies full of experts. There's a guy named Sam Walton. He was the founder of Walmart. He built a company which has 2.3 million employees. It's one of the most successful companies in America. I'm wondering if anyone in this room knows the last words on Sam Walton's deathbed. Was it, "Wow, I did it"? Or, "Yeah, I made it"? The answer is no. The last words that Sam Walton uttered were, "I blew it." And he died one of the wealthiest men in America, but with little connection to his family. And so last year I had this amazing fortune to travel to Dharamshala, India with my wife, and we had the amazing opportunity to spend 2 days with His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama. And he helped really crystallize, for me, the difference in my life between happiness and joy. And sort of happiness has come from sort of every successive achievement I've had in my life, but true joy has come from building an amazing, fun-loving family. These things are not mutually exclusive, and this is really something that I think it's important to emphasize.
Well, listen, a lot to like soak in and absorb and think about. Barry, I just want to thank you for being candid with us, and also thank you for being with us. Everyone, Barry Beck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your speech. I'm Hamid, a computer science student as a sophomore, and I'm doing a study on entrepreneurs integrating AI in their businesses. So this main question is, how do you address problems that arise from AI, like AI bias, false predictions, AI transparency, and issues that like arise from the usage of AI in businesses?
You know, for us with using AI today, you know, we have to watch it all the time, and we're constantly tweaking it and managing because it's very early for us. And so we have to make sure that we have, you know, in our business, we have doctors that are overseeing and tweaking the AI and its thinking to make sure that the AI isn't running everything. This is an important point, and it has a lot of oversight by our doctors. You know, we have 400 doctors that work for us now, so they're always overseeing it to make sure that the AI, especially at these early days, doesn't just sort of go rogue on us. So we're, believe me, keeping a watchful eye over it. But it's been helpful, and there's no way that we could grow our business today looking at all these patients without the help and support of artificial intelligence.
Hi, thank you for taking this question. My name is Shivani, and I'm a Cornell MNG graduate in the biomedical engineering department. I wanted to ask, what is it that makes you realize a landscape in a completely different domain? Because all the 3 businesses you've had, none of them have like a constant domain expertise. So what is it that kind of showed you that this is the need and this completely different out of like your domain expertise?
I try to get off easy and say it's luck. And maybe a lot of it is luck for me. But I think the best way for me to find my next idea is sort of at the cutting edge of my current idea. And so I think that's where we can find your future. Just look at what you're doing now. Look at Warren Buffett. He says, do you want to know where you're going to be in 10 years? Just look around and see who you're hanging out with. And so I think everything in the world today really comes out of something before it, right? If you look at movies today, they were the former Broadway, and Broadway was the former novel. And so I think everything has something from the past folded into it. And so I think about my inspiration in companies like that, and that's how I look for my next idea.
Thank you.
Super. Again, thanks so much, Barry, our 2023 Cornell Entrepreneur of the Year.